You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
Dave, I've got a stack waddy for you.
Good.
TV quizmaster Richard Osman currently has 3 novels in the top 10 in his Thursday Murder Club series, a bit of a literary phenomenon, and his crime fiction deliberately chooses characters with the most mundane-sounding, ordinary names. And pop stars born with mundane-sounding, ordinary names tend to change them to something more exotic. So here are 10 names, and I put it to you, you have to figure out which are the Richard Osman characters and which are the birth names of real musicians.
Oh, okay. Good.
All right, okay.
Yeah,
so Rory Graham, is that a fictional sleuth or a pop star in hiding?
Fictional sleuth.
It's Rag and Bone Man. That's his real name.
This is good. Go on.
Oh, you like it? Okay.
Yeah,
William Perks.
Well, I know that. That's Bill Wyman.
Yeah, I thought you would. That was Bill Wyman. No wonder he changed his name.
Yeah.
Ron Ritchie, crime solver or rock god?
I'm going to say rock god.
Ritchie.
I'm going to say rock god.
No, he is the headstrong former union activist in the Thursday Murder Club.
This is good.
This
is good.
Maureen Gilkes, is that fact or is that fiction? Is that a pop star or is that a Richard Osman character?
Richard Osman character.
Yeah, it is. She's the best friend of the Murder Club leader, Joyce.
Very good.
Elizabeth Grant, real or made up?
Made up.
No, she's real. That's Lana Del Rey. That's her real name. Elizabeth Grant. Hello. Joyce Meadowcroft.
Oh, good.
Pop star or fictional sleuth?
Fictional sleuth.
Yeah, she is. She's the former nurse and member of the Thursday Murder Club. Richard James.
Rock star.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, you remember he's the Cornish techno wizard, Aphex Twin.
Oh, right, of course.
I think you probably knew, actually.
Yeah,
Carol Kirkwood.
Is Carol Kirkwood Carol Decker?
No.
No, go on.
Probably close, actually. I don't know, Carol Decker is a pretty normal name. Carol Kirkwood, no, she's a fictional crime-solving weather forecaster. And lastly, Brian Warner. Brian Warner, there's a dull name for you. There's a prosaic name.
If you were called Brian Warner and you fancied being a rock star, you would have to change your name. So I'm going to say rock star.
Yeah, it is. It is, of course, Marilyn Manson. So there you go. You did well. You did very well.
It is. That's fantastic. Very good. That's very good. So Twitter, that's the story of the week, isn't it? Have you been following all this?
Unbelievable story. I'm riveted by it. Can I sum up what I think has happened?
You could try. Go on. Yeah.
Elon Musk offered to buy Twitter, didn't he, for a large sum of money. Whether or not he wanted to buy it or just wanted the publicity or to remind us that he's the world's richest man, I don't know. He then discovered he was in a binding contract where he had to buy it, by which time I think he'd realised that paying $44 billion for a company that loses $222 million a year might have been a really bad idea. So he's been lumbered with it. He's got off, obviously, on the wrong foot, hasn't he? Quite bad-tempered about it. Has fired half the staff already, very, very publicly. He has a $1 billion mortgage to pay per year on the loan he's taken off.
Because that's the big issue. You can be the wealthiest man in the world, but if you have to borrow, as he has borrowed, $13 billion to help with the purchase.
Yeah.
We've all noticed what's happening with interest rates at the moment. You know, if you're borrowing $13 billion from somebody right now to help pay for a company that doesn't make any money, they've got you by the balls. The people who've lent you the $13 billion, and they're going to want this money back really quickly. And how he's going to get it, I do not know.
See, that's the extraordinary thing. I've done a bit of maths, an idle moment this morning, because reading so much about it. He wants to charge, doesn't he, the blue tick holders $8 each.
Like me.
Like you. You're a blue tick holder. Exactly. Now, I think there are only 420,000 blue tick holders. And blue tick holders are, let's be honest, one of the main drives. That's why people join Twitter, basically, to follow people that they're interested in, right? So if there's only 420 of them, 420,000, and he's charging $8 each, that's less than £4 million a year.
No, it's $8 a month, isn't it? Something like that. Yeah.
Oh, is it a month? Oh, okay. Oh, right, that's different. Okay, maybe it is a month.
Yeah. But
that's more like it. Yeah, okay.
It's still a very long shot as to how it will work, because my experience with blue ticks is kind of odd. I didn't really know that they existed until I kind of woke up one morning and found out I had one. It's not anything I
So
did.
who decides that they're going to give you one? How come it's bestowed upon you?
Presumably there's some kind of council that I don't know what it is at Twitter that decides on these things. And decides people like me are of massive prominence, obviously, and that there's some need to discriminate between me and people who might
imposter.
be an imposter,
and all the other David Hepworth.
Yeah, there you go.
Appear to know a lot about rock music and football.
And so they gave me a blue tick, and but the very idea they could turn around to me and say, I tell you what, that blue tick that we gave you and you didn't ask for, we'd like you to give us $8 a month.
$8 a month.
I think that's a very tough sell, that is. And also, the thing I've been thinking about this is, should they manage to persuade a load of blue tick holders that they should pay for the privilege, the relationship with those blue tick holders changes massively the minute you do that. Yeah. In that they're then subscribers, and they then have rights. You know what I mean? They're then entitled to insist on certain things, which very much changes the balance of the whole thing. Of course, the other thing that's happened in the middle of all this is freaked out by the kind of upset and the potential controversy around this. A bunch of wealthy blue chip advertisers have done what wealthy blue chip advertisers always do when there's any controversy around.
Yeah, also looking for publicity.
Sit on their hands, and they are bothered about publicity. Volkswagen are not bothered about publicity at all. They just say, all right, we're going to let them cool their heels for a little while, you know. And so Elon Musk, I'm sure he's an immensely clever man. He's clearly he is the richest man in the world. But he's got to the ripe old age of 51 without realizing what advertisers do, which is, if they got any problem, they'll just go and spend their money somewhere else.
And there are lots of other places to spend it.
Loads of other places.
But also, they're not going to be terribly happy about being on a site that allows a lot of what I think we'll have to call hate speech. Interesting. He let Kanye West back on again. Kanye West back on again with a tweet, which I've just found, which says, "Welcome back to Twitter, my friend, Elon Musk." So it's a personal tweet to him to allow him back on again. So that's the kind of decisions he's making. And advertisers aren't wildly happy about being associated with that kind of thing, are they? I mean, and also he's then announced, which I think is even more astonishing, that he has lost a large amount of advertising revenue. And this is to do, he says, with activists who are trying to stop free speech.
It's nothing to do with activists at all.
I mean, he himself tweeted a thing about a baseless conspiracy theory about the assault on Nancy Pelosi's husband himself, and then deleted it. So the whole thing is just going around in circles.
Well, it's weird. The weird thing is, at the centre of this, he's bought it. It's a private company. He runs. He doesn't have shareholders and so forth. This would never happen in a normal transaction. You'd have wiser counsels will prevail. Somebody would be standing there saying, "No, not so fast. Don't do that." You know what I mean? Clearly, nobody's doing that at all. It's just a load of. It's a handful of incredibly, mind-bogglingly wealthy individuals sitting in a room saying, "What do we feel like doing?" As if it was. As if it was Mark Zuckerberg inventing Facebook in his dorm at Harvard all those years ago. Not that many years ago at all, in fact, at all. It's an absolutely extraordinary state of affairs.
The people who previously owned it must be just absolutely weeping with mirth, mustn't they? Because they got far more for it than they should ever have got. And they now will be able to sit back and just watch this utter catastrophe unravel. And people are leaving. There was a very moving thing from Eric Idle this morning saying that he's leaving. People are just they're deserting Twitter. Maybe they'll come back, but they're certainly leaving, So I don't know. It's fascinating.
The Word Podcast. Prime cuts of popular culture served fresh each week.
So further to what we were just saying about social media, this story that on Ian Leslie's excellent newsletter this morning, which was inspired by a piece about the architects Now, the Architects are one of those bands. A little bit of a side note here. I heard of them about 3 or 4 years ago via a neighbour of mine who said, "Oh, my son always fancies being a rock photographer or whatever." And I'm thinking, best of luck with that.
Yeah.
In the 21st century. Anyway.
The streets are paved with gold there.
There you go. He said, and no, anyway, he's working with this group called the Architects. And he says they're really quite big. And I thought, well, I've never heard of them really, but okay, fair enough. And then it turns out, as I see this guy, yes, he works for them. He's a kind of videography, does loads of things for them. And the Architects, since then, I've taken as my kind of test case, have a group who are, as I would term it, obscurely, incredibly famous. You know what I mean?
Well, they're playing the O2, is that right?
It's, and they don't just play, big gigs in Britain. They play big gigs all over the world.
Yeah.
And they're clearly...
They're metalcore, aren't they, from Brighton? Yeah.
Yeah, they're from Brighton. They're very kind of serious, very chin-stroking, but their fans absolutely adore them. And, they've built a fantastic following and a fantastic business out of this. No doubt about it. They've been together absolutely years. And yet, unlike a kind of rock band who would have been well known 40 years ago, the average person in the street have never heard of them at all and never will hear about them. Anyway, the point that Ian Leslie was making was that after years of laboring in relatively benign obscurity, they've come up with a track that's really popular. And of course, that's really good, isn't it? No, because their fans suddenly, or some of the fans, suddenly hate them. Yes, and
as Ian Leslie says, they now think that this is an act of betrayal. People used to think this. That historically, people have always thought that. You like a little group and suddenly you get big and you're a bit resentful. Small number of people, but you've never been able to advertise that fact publicly.
That's the difference.
That's the difference, isn't it? Now everyone on social media is getting together and saying this is an absolute outrage. And of course, the guy's mortified, isn't he? He had some really interesting theories about it.
Personally hurt, So the guy from the Architects said, and he made a really good point. He said, if this had been around in the days of Sergeant Pepper would never have happened, because the blowback on anything would be so kind of piercing, so upsetting. And that's the point he's making. And I think he's absolutely right that it doesn't matter how famous you are and how wealthy you are. People don't feel bulletproof when that kind of criticism comes their way. Because the criticism is always the same. It's always, you've come out in your true colours now at last. I always thought you were a nasty piece of work. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's the kind of thing.
Well, Ian Leslie makes a really good point, doesn't he, about Bob Dylan's tour, the 1966 tour.
Yeah.
He said, I always thought, Bob Dylan kind of didn't mind that. He just thought, this is the music I want to play and I'm absolutely confident about it. And I'm quite amused by the fact that the audience hate us. But no, of course, there is footage of them all sitting there absolutely mortified because they're getting so much abuse every night from the audience. And they just have to believe. At one point, Robbie Robertson says, I believe we're right. I believe we're doing the right thing. We must keep going. And he says, Dylan's tour might have just signalled the birth of the empowered audience, a mass audience with clear expectations, which talks back when those expectations aren't met and those demands aren't listened to. And it probably was. But now, of course, that audience has got an enormous platform in which to tell people what they think. And that's the main difference, isn't it?
And then reading this piece just made me reflect on something I've been thinking about for a year or so, is that the public, the general public, unchained, with a mouse in their hand, feeding back on anything about football or about politics or about pop music or about celebrity or anything or about a restaurant down the road are, I put it to you, way worse than the worst journalist you've ever heard of in your life.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
And, journalists, I know journalists, and, they have the lowest, rating in terms of public trust. Okay. Well, placed below that, your average person on Twitter, unloading on what they think about the Architects.
Yeah, unedited, ruthless, mean.
Or whatever. I mean, Because
football, he makes a really good point there about football. It's how many managers have there been in the Premiership this season alone? I mean, it's virtually half of them have been replaced, and a lot of that's to do with the fact that their supporters have got together and made public their very, very bitter thoughts about the failure of the team. So that whole process is massively speeded up.
But just one more point about journalists is that even the most disreputable journalist, in your worst nightmare, and we don't doubt such people existed and have existed and will continue to exist, even the worst you've ever come across, can't just go into print without somebody, first of all, saying, no, you can't say that.
You can't say that. There's going to be some absolutely.
Absolutely. You've done it wrong.
Yeah,
do it again.
Take a deep breath, never think about it. Exactly.
And that doesn't happen in the world of, this is why, taking it to a mundane local level, I don't belong in the WhatsApp group in my streets, because I just know what will happen. There's some to do about parking or God knows what, and instantly somebody goes too far.
It will all go off. Yeah. And you'll fall out with a neighbour.
Absolutely. Don't have to do with it all. So anyway, that's social media dealt with.
And but it's also the fact that quite a lot of music people tend to try out, don't they? Try out online to see if they get a reaction. If they get the right reaction, they then evolve it. So the days of actually doing something you believed was right are very gradually eroding, aren't they?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Now, the other not so hot topic is I wanted to ask you, because I haven't asked you. Now, normally, I think it was the World Cup is 2 weeks away or something like that.
Yeah, it's 2 weeks, yeah.
2 weeks away. Now, normally, if we're 2 weeks away from the World Cup, it's like being 2 weeks away from Christmas. Yes? Because you're thinking, I've got that to look forward to.
Yeah, and every day there's going to be stuff in the papers and all over the news saying there's this kind of speculation.
Normally it's in summer, obviously, and normally you're thinking, we've got the end of the season. Oh, don't worry, we don't have to miss football. It's coming back on bigger and better in a few weeks' time. Do you feel like that right now?
No. Well, firstly, there is simply only one story about Qatar at the moment, isn't it? And if you don't acknowledge that story, which is the kind of the human rights record and the homophobia, if you don't acknowledge that, it looks like you don't care about that aspect of it. And that might then reflect badly on you. And so nobody's able to just say, great, the World Cup's coming. Who's going to be in the squad? Who's going to be there? And who's going to be? Who'll be the surprise outsiders who are going to triumph? And who are going to be the big standards who are going to trip up and fall early on? There is none of that at all.
I think, and you can't scientifically prove this at all, but this is what I feel in my water, Mark.
Yeah.
Nobody gives a monkeys about the whole thing, apart from the handful of people who are paid to give a monkeys about it right now.
Well, in terms of just making a fuss about it now, you're absolutely right.
Broadcasters have to do it. They've all signed up their sponsorship deals. I was listening to Talk Sport this morning, and it's desperate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Please be excited about this. You know what I mean? It's coming up. We've got a lot of revenue on the line this year around this thing. So this applies to Gary Neville. It applies to, Gary Lineker. It applies to all the broadcasters, all the newspapers. They're the people who are bothered about it. If you don't meet anybody in the pub or as part of your daily life who raises the subject for a second, and that's been my experience.
No, I totally agree with you, because you're haunted by those kind of memories of the whole Sepp Blatter affair and the fact it's just a load of people have bought themselves into a community.
But also, it's leaving aside, if we can say this, leaving aside the kind of human rights side of it. Just park that for a moment.
Yeah.
It's the wrong time of year. It's in the wrong place.
It could be the wrong
middle
temperature.
Of the damn season.
Aren't they going to have to play in some air-conditioned stadium? I mean, all that could go wrong. It could just be too hot. It could be too difficult. It just doesn't feel right. And the Premiership is being held up for about a month, which is appalling. What an intrusion.
It's like, I tell you what it's like, is, when we hear about Australians spending Christmas on the beach, do we feel envious? No, we bloody
No, we
don't.
don't.
We not at all. We
But
think
it seems wrong.
we think poor sods.
Yeah.
You know, get it?
It's not very Christmassy.
Christmas is coziness, you know what I mean?
It is.
And like
absolutely.
the World Cup is summerness, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the every fourth summer there's more reason to stay indoors and watch telly, you know. And you don't feel that at all. And now maybe
do you think it'll change? See, don't forget that before each World Cup, there is always a oh God, you know, we're going to do badly. The stadiums haven't been finished in time. There's something wrong. There's something about the organisation that we disagree with. And then if it gets going on the right foot and we start to win, people get involved. So that might. I don't know. I mean, I must admit, we're going into it with in the wrong frame of mind completely.
I think the world's going into the wrong frame of mind. You know,
I think it's the whole world.
I think the whole world.
Watching Gary Neville on Have I Got News for You last night. He was the host, and there he was being the cheery kind of, well, you know, the World Cup's coming. And of course, he got a complete roasting from Ian Hislop about the fact that he's going out there and accepting the money to do the commentary. And of course, I have to say, I love Gary Neville. I love him. You know, all that stuff he's done for the poor of Manchester and the NHS, and he's just a brilliant bloke. There he was trying to defend the fact he was going out there. He said, well, you've got two options. Either you go out there and you say something about it, or you stay at home and you don't. And Ian Hislop said, well, why don't you just stay at home and say something about it and not accept the Qatari dollar? You know, and he didn't really have a response for that because, you know, God knows what they're getting paid. Can you imagine? It must be colossal. But anyway, we shall see. Maybe we'll all be here in 2 weeks' time getting very excited about it. But at the moment, it's a bit...
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment.
The Word Podcast, one of the few things you really need in life.
So I've been thinking about the bass because I got some fabulous new speakers, spend ridiculous amounts of money on them. But I've not regretted it so far. And I think I've got away with it so far, Mark.
Yeah, good.
And one of the things that is wonderful about these speakers is suddenly bass sounds wonderful. I don't mean it sounds, you know, it doesn't make the house tremble or anything like that. I'm not bothered about that kind of thing. It just, you can actually hear it, you know. You know what I mean? You don't just feel it, you can actually hear it. You can hear the tone of the bass. And so that's made me suddenly drawn to lots of records in which the bass is really prominent. And actually, yesterday, I went and bought a Stanley Clarke album.
Nice.
Stanley Clarke's album, School Days. I got a CD of that. And I was, last night, I was playing a load of, Weather Report and Joni Mitchell records that feature Jaco Pastorius on the bass. Absolutely fantastic stuff. And I was kind of recapping the extraordinary story of Jaco Pastorius. So do you know
I passed in the street in New York.
Did you really? Go on.
I was out there for whistle testing. I think it must have been about 1986. And I was out there with our producer, Trevor Dan. I was doing a little piece about Suzanne Vega. And I was on my way to meet Suzanne Vega. And this guy came stumbling past me. I've never seen anybody look so dishevelled and dilapidated. He had long hair and a kind of ponytail and looked completely pissed and out of his head. And he had no shoes. And I thought, that's Jaco Pastorius.
I never knew that.
God, I should have told you that. Yeah, and I thought, that's definitely him. And I think about 6 months, maybe 7 or 8 months later, he died.
He died. He was a derelict, you know.
Yeah, he was
very
in
quick.
Desperate state.
His bass, his legendary bass, was stolen from where? From a park bench in Central Park.
Yeah.
Which rather suggested that was the last thing he had, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was trying to remember. So Jaco Pastorius, I first heard of Jaco Pastorius in, I think, 1974. On a Pat Metheny record, first time I'd heard of Pat Metheny, made a record called Bright Size Life on ECM, very simple jazz trio, and the one of the other members of the trio was Jaco Pastorius. It was kind of similar generation, you know, and like Pat Metheny was kind of young, hip, good-looking jazz guitar player. Jaco Pastorius was young, hip, good-looking electric bass player, and became a real legend for having this very distinctive style. He took the bass and he took the frets off it, you know, so he could slide his fingers up and down. And
like
he had
chords and stuff. Yeah.
Very incredibly lyrical sound.
Oh, God. Have you ever heard "Come On, Come Over" by him? Look that up.
Yes,
absolutely unbelievable. The last 2 minutes of that. I mean, it's very, very complicated technical stuff, but beautiful to listen to. Your speakers would love that. Carry on. Go on.
And anyway, he joined Weather Report. Having introduced himself to Joe Zawinul from Weather Report, pretty much saying, "I'm the best bass player in the world," because front was not something he was short of at all. He was a completely different creature than the average jazz cat. He was kind of hippie. And sure enough, he was the best bass player in the world. He joins Weather Report, and they start having hits, don't they? Birdland and so forth. And I saw them. I try to remember exactly where I saw them. It's sometime in the late 70s. Must have been Hammersmith. And I always loved Weather Report. Well, Weather Report were formed by Joe Zawinul, Wayne Shorter, who were two kind of Miles Davis alumni. They're the old jazzers. And suddenly they're joined on stage by this young, good-looking guy who stands up and plays the bass, which looks dead sexy. And then if that wasn't sexy enough, used to play with his shirt off.
He did.
Can you imagine what kind of message that sends to Joe Zawinul?
So suddenly the male-female balance in the Weather Report audience starts to change dramatically, I'm sure. Yeah.
And anyway, he's the star that people turn up to see, really. Certainly anybody who played the bass and fancied themselves as a bass player. And I was listening today there was a live album they must have made of that tour called 830, where Jaco's star has risen sufficiently in Weather Report that he's allowed to be co-producer on the live album. And that clearly manifests itself in only one way, in turning up the audience applause noise whenever he plays a solo.
There's a bass solo.
Whenever there's a bit of bass, you suddenly hear the whole of wherever it is rise as one in adoration of Jaco. And anyway, he was with them for a few years, and then he obviously got. I think he had two problems. That it was drink and drugs, but he had some major psychiatric.
Yeah, I think he did. Yeah,
as well, and went off as a solo, and then was what eventually killed him was he turned up unannounced at a party after a gig in, I think, Los Angeles, and had been told he wasn't going to be admitted. It was chucked out, but still tried to get back in.
Oh, then was he shot or attacked?
No, he wasn't. He was
attacked.
There was some altercation with a very, very heavy security man or whatever.
That's right. I think he actually was imprisoned.
But manslaughter,
Yeah, manslaughter, 4 months. That's right. Yeah,
and that was the end of Jaco Pastorius. But the sound he made. And I was listening to
For the Roses. Isn't he on For the Roses?
No, he's not on For the Roses. He's on Hejira. Yeah. He's on Hejira, and he's very distinctive on Hejira. And he's on that Shadows and Light, which was the live album she made not long after that. But I tell you what, he's all over, and that's what I was playing last night, which is not a record I'd listened to very much in the past, apart from one track, is Joni Mitchell's Don Juan's Reckless Daughter.
Oh, yeah, fantastic.
Look, he's absolutely key in that whole record, you know what I mean? The lead instrument on that record is the bass.
Yeah.
In a way that's not kind of flashily at all, you know what I mean? Because usually people say, oh, you got to hear the bass on this. It usually means it's frantic, you know what I mean? There's millions of notes. That's what we're supposed to be impressed by.
But no, it's not. Often it's just the timbre, isn't it? It's the kind of the resonance of it, like London Calling. And Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick, another fantastic one. Lemon Song, Roundabout by Yes, fantastic. Good Times by
Talking of Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick, when we were talking to Trevor Horn this week, weren't we, about his excellent book, Adventures in Recording, is that what it's called? I think.
Yeah, another bass player, yeah.
And of course, he talks about two tribes. Frankie Goes to Hollywood. And they tried that, didn't they, with the Blockheads? He writes about this.
Yeah.
They tried it with the Blockheads, and it was good, but it didn't quite have the energy that they wanted. But the bit that they kept was the bit that Norman Watroy
That's right.
contributed to it,
Who's so fantastic.
It is absolutely fantastic.
I was reading on the subject of bases, I was reading the Dylan's Philosophy of Modern Song book.
And are you enjoying that?
Well, It's difficult to say. It's beautifully written. He has these kind of subjective flights of fancy, and it's very, very, sense impressionist. But he never tells you anything about the actual songwriter, or very rarely about the musicians. It's all, this is my feeling listening to this song as a listener. So I miss the kind of journalistic element if I want to know who these people are, But there's I thought it was a really good one this morning. I was just reading this thing about Phil Lesh, about the Grateful Dead. He says, actually, he's very good at the Grateful Dead. He says, essentially, they're a dance band. They have more in common with Artie Shaw and bebop than they do with the Byrds and the Stones. Whirling dervish dancers are as much a part of their music as anything else. There's a big difference to the type of women that you see from the stage when you're with the Stones compared to the Dead. With the Stones, it's like being at a porno convention. With the Dead, it's more like the women you see in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? He said that they're floating and snaky and free and slithering like in a typical daydream. Thousands of them. It's really interesting. They're talking about Phil Lesh, he says. I know. But Phil Lesh, he says, what makes them essentially a dance band probably begins with the jazz classical bassist Phil Lesh and the Elvin Jones influenced Bill Kreutzmann. Lesh is one of the most skilled bassists you will ever hear in subtlety and invention. Combined with Kreutzmann, the rhythm section is hard to beat. That rhythm section, along with the elements of traditional rock and roll and American folk music, is what makes the Dead insurpassable. It's brilliant, isn't it? I mean, I thought you want more of that. His analysis, as Mary talks about Elvis Costello, he said, Elvis is fantastic, but there's just too many ideas. There's just too much to take in.
It's true.
It's just too much to absorb. You just want him to kind of calm down and edit it and just give you less. It's really good. You wish there was more about it. It's a good book, though. It's fantastic.
The Word Podcast. Clearly, there is no plan.
This is a book I keep coming back to, Mark, if I can list it.
It's so good. I've been reading it too.
This is The World of Family History by Simon Sebag Montefiore, who we had as a guest on Word in Your Ear a couple of weeks ago. And if you missed this, basically, it's a history of the whole world, but it's a family history. So the idea is it's told through families. So it's about personal relationships as well as history. And so I won't claim that I started this book at the beginning and read all the way to the end, but I put it on the side in the kitchen. And I just, when the kettle's boiling, I just open it and I pick a page at random.
And on every page,
something
something astonishing happens. Usually involving kind of the mass murder of 30,000 people who are all boiled, flayed alive, and then burnt to a crisp. It's unbelievable.
It's actually sex and violence very often.
Yeah, it is.
It's what it comes down to.
Oh, yeah, it is.
It's absolutely extraordinary. So, Mark, I'm going to try this as a live experiment.
Go on.
There's 1,000 pages in this book, as you will well know.
Yep.
Tell me a page number. Give me a page number. I'm going to have a go.
643. 643. See if you can find something horrific on page 643.
643. Here we go. 640, 641, 643. Okay. Mahmoud Hotak and 15,000 Afghans armed with a Pashtun innovation light cannon mounted on camels invaded Iran. At this place, 50,000 splendid Persian troops blocked the way. I could tell where this is going. They routed the Iranians, laid siege to Isfahan, where 80,000 died of starvation. That's the kind of thing. Just pick absolutely. I'm going to give you have you got a copy of it there?
I've got one here. I was going to just read you a couple of little tiny bits. It's so funny. I was reading this morning. One is about Peter I, the Muscovite Tsar.
Oh, God.
It says, Peter, a twitching giant of 6'7", said, was gifted with the three essentials that every politician requires to achieve anything. VAR, vision, acumen and resources, as well as an invincible constitution and a taste for wild wassailing that involved lethal alcoholic consumption, dwarves jumping out of cakes, naked girls and fist fights. So that's just the kind of people he's dealing with. And here's another one. This is the French Revolution. He says, French Revolution says, in Paris, Sanson, now beloved as Charlotte or as the National Avenger, and his sons beheaded 2,900 of Robespierre's victims. Sanson became so exhausted he handed over to his son Gabriel, and in a telling moment of the terror, Gabriel was beheading so many people that holding up ahead to the crowd, he slipped on the blood, fell off the scaffold and broke his neck. Like Saturn, wrote an observer, the revolution devours its children, and the feasting had just begun. And those were just two random moments where I just opened the book up. It's absolutely incredible, isn't it?
Highly recommended. So, as is Trevor Horn's book, Adventures in Modern Recording, which we took Trevor. So that's out there on YouTube.
And our lovely recording with Pat Nevin, too, which is fantastic.
Pat Nevin, the footballer, formerly of Chelsea, Everton and Scotland, and but really wanted to be in a rock band.
Yeah, he did.
Rather than
the moment when he gets up and sings with the Proclaimers, he gets far more attention than any of his sensational goals.
So that's all going on. As ever, if you're not a Patreon supporter, why don't you look into it? Patreon.com/word in your ear. And you could be joining us at our social in a couple of weeks' time. When is it, the 14th?
14th, Monday the 14th, week on Monday.
Monday
it's a little place in Covent Garden, I think. It'll be fun.
In a London hostelry where we shall sit around and drink pints and talk shit about rock and roll. What's not
as is our wont.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.